Hello, and we are back in our wonderful Pokemon Go theme park in Planet Coaster today. A lot of stuff kind of getting done this episode. We are pretty much done with Pallet Town come kind of near the end of that. I just have an area that I'll probably take some suggestions on, as I don't really know what to put there. But starting off, we're going to go ahead and finish this house that we started last episode. And this is, of course, Blue's house, Gary Oak's house, basically your rival's house in the Pokemon games. So we were going for kind of a higher end kind of home compared to, say, Ash's house or Red's house, main character's house, whatever. I'm sure everyone named their characters, not everyone left them as a default. So we are basically cleaning up the ceiling, adding the back porch, adding some railings to those, and then deciding basically what to do with this chimney. Now, the problem with this block, it's great for doing, kind of these square pieces like chimneys and other things, is that the game renders this block kind of oddly. And so when I zoom out, what you'll see is occasionally some of the surfaces kind of disappear, becomes transparent, and then load back in. I don't know if that's a problem with me just playing on the game on medium graphics rather than high, just so I can pump out a little bit more FPS, or what's really causing that. But it's a little bit noticeable from a distance, though certain surfaces kind of has a longer LOD than others. Here, this is us basically aligning a section of wood kind of pattern here for our roof. This one's going to have a wooden roof. It's not going to use that red roof that is on the first house. You got to try and keep these things, I guess, separate and recognizable. And then, of course, using modular building, we can quickly throw together a roof kind of pattern and copy that around quickly. Again, as long as you remember to align things to the grid. It's something that I'm really bad at remembering to do, and hopefully my repeating of this will always kind of keep you guys that, the grid is super important for these assets and things like that. And then, of course, you want to alternate your wooden pattern just a little bit, just so it's not all the same thing everywhere. And even adding some additional cross members over top of the tiles, I find looks fairly nice and rustic. So what we're doing here is putting the back glass sliding door on his home now. And I am even going to use this ring, this iron ring, to kind of make a little pull handle on that. Now, the problem being that this is going to end up turning into a drinks shop kind of on the back end, very similar to what we did, say, at Ash's house and how that serves food. But, for now, that glass door, I guess, was just there until pretty much later. At this point, we're going to go ahead and make kind of a little bit more of a fancy window for kind of the kitchen area. That's what I imagine this side section to be. And, it's best to kind of measure things out first, kind of figure out how far away from the wall this needs to be to make some sense. That's why I was doing some tests. And then also because of the grid placement, I'm actually having to put this off center, and that's why it was built on the edge of a wall here as kind of a marker, and then shift it over just that little bit. We're going to use the driftwood as kind of a good source to do the overhang atop this kind of jut out. I forget the technical term of this. If you guys can let me know. I always kind of forget these architectural terms here. And then we'll just seal that with the kind of smooth kind of stone window piece just to make the trim all nice. Gonna add some back steps. These are actually kind of double wide steps, which are, a little bit, of a more 30-degree slope rather than a strict 45 like the front steps there. Here, you can see we're actually going to go in and try and fix that texturing pattern that was plaguing me on the chimney. And for the most part, it is fixed. Certain areas are still a little finicky, but oh well. Gonna go ahead and then put our wonderful plants and flowers in the window boxes. And half this episode is going to be working on this house. The other half, we're going to be building the other structure. Now, there's going to be some skips in here, i.e. in between this structure and the next one. And that's just to kind of save time on the video. And then, you know, I doubt you guys really want to see me just keep planting all these trees and laying all these rocks and trying to make everything look good. But we're going with an iron rod fence around the rival's house. Again, just a little bit higher in than the wooden fence surrounding the players, but it's still, in my opinion, rustic enough to fit. Bigger yard, you know, it's going to have less plants around in the yard. It's going to be a lot more green space. Here I was trying to fit in maybe the drink stall and bathroom on the back side there. Didn't really like this, so I ended up kind of getting rid of it and moving it over time. After that, at this point I believe the house is done, and I'm adding a little flat ride just to keep guests kind of moving throughout the town. I don't really know if this one's going to stay or not, but it's kind of necessary just to have people using a lot of the pathing that we do lay out here. The queue line ends up being changed a couple times, so I can't even really talk about this one, considering this is going to be removed here in a second. This is a major problem about living in the city. I don't know if you guys can hear those sirens or not, but I definitely can through my headset, which is never good. Anyways, just gonna have to try and ignore that. The queue line is gonna move to the right side here. We're just gonna clear out the shrubberies to make this all kind of work. It's gonna be a relatively short line. You know, these flat rides, I don't really see them as the most popular things in the world. I just use them to try and get people to go throughout the whole roads. And now at this point we're going to go ahead and build pretty much the final building in Pallet Town. There is another area that I'm going to need some ideas for, but we'll cover that in the real-time section. But this is Professor Oak's lab. Now in the anime, his lab is actually in his house up on top of the hill, but we're also combining the anime and the game a little bit, so I decided to give him his proper lab that would be in Pallet Town itself. And it's a relatively straightforward building. It's very boxy. You know, we're gonna add or try to add as many details as possible, from a white trim along the roof and then a white trim along the ground, just to kind of make it balance out a little bit. Copy and paste. Real big important part about this build is the fact that, one, being able to select the upper half and then just raise it up to give it just a little bit more height, because at the time it wasn't even, you know, as tall as one of the other homes. Now this I ended up messing up because I wasn't actually clicked on the build, so I couldn't select these properly, but I wanted to actually give the structure some proper cornerstones. Cornerstones, you know, it's basically just a rectangle, square rectangle pattern that goes up the sides of a building. I don't really follow any specific, I guess you could say, rules when doing these. Besides, I like to start with the wider one on the bottom. I don't know if that's accurate or not. You know, you guys can probably correct me because you know more than I do most of the time. And so I just feel like this is the best looking way to do cornerstones, even though it might not be the most accurate way. And then at this point, you basically have the corner made, and then we can copy the previous section up around. And then at that point I realized, well, we already have the full corner at one section, so why don't I just copy the full corner at once? And same with the little jut out kind of side buildings. The side buildings aren't in the actual game by any means. I just needed to try and make this structure a little bit more fancy than you would find in the games itself, as the games, you know, those buildings, they don't really give you much to work off from. So you're gonna have to use a little bit of your imagination and come up with ways to do things. Even this chimney here, you know, it's a square chimney, and then it also has angled bits off the sides. It was a little bit of a pain to put together, but I think overall worth it. It's definitely kind of a more unique kind of structure. Here, I'm aligning the main kind of column to the grid itself, because obviously gotta make sure that aligns really well. And then from there, you'll copy it up. Now, I raised it up a little bit higher. You can see the other wood down there, but I end up covering that up anyways, so that's why we were able to get as much height out of just so little pieces that we've done. And then copy that around, kind of start with the edges. The straight edges are the easiest to do, and then go back in and do the corners. The corners, basically you just expand out the straight parts just a little bit and kind of do a stair step pattern until you meet in the center. And what you do then is basically seal that somehow. So you can either try and seal that flush. I decided to just put an actual element slightly above the wood itself so that it just covers up that gap really nice and clean. Gonna copy it over so I can do the other corners really quick because everything is based off that grid measurement. And if you do that, you'll be relatively successful in doing these type of complicated kind of shapes and structures. Gonna add the windows. The windows are pretty interesting on the lab, the upper stories being circle windows and the lower ones being square, kind of rectangles. Also, it's gonna have to have a red awning to kind of match the upper kind of brick chimney thing. And so we're just gonna use the same kind of wooden technique there to just give it a nice red awning. At this point, we're just gonna do the windows. The windows are made out of these, I guess, stone arches from one of the doors. And it definitely took a while to kind of mess around with to get this to work. But, you know, I think the payoff was fairly successful. At this point, we're gonna go ahead and skip because the building is pretty much done. And I do want to kind of keep these episodes rolling on. So when we get into real time, I'll go ahead and show you kind of the finished structure itself, and we'll go from there. Alright, here we are. This is the finished Professor Oak's laboratory. Obviously, a little bit different than what you guys just saw. A lot more progress has been made, but it's a lot of kind of just minor detailing. And for me, that's kind of the most boring, mundane sections of doing builds sometimes, and so I just kind of power through it. The reason I don't record a lot of that though is most of the time I end up kind of moving the camera a lot, so I'm always kind of doing this. I'm trying to look around, find empty spaces, and fill them in with a detail, and so that doesn't really make for a good video. Especially when you speed it up by like times 10 or times 15, it becomes very jarring. So that's why we skip that and just come into the, I guess, the real-time section. Let's go ahead and, I guess, start from the beginning. This is your rival's house here. Definitely a little bit different and definitely bigger than your starting house. Which is great, you know. The little window turned out really nice. The back porch area ended up being where people will go to access their drinks. Even built kind of a detail around the trees here using these little wooden pieces. I always forget the names of them off the top of my head, but they're also attached to a roof piece so that I can copy them around, and I copied it around and to surround some of the major trees around the town, even around the Professor Oak's house. Also gave it a little wooden archway here, just kind of something fancy along the street so people could walk through, and I think that turned out relatively nice from a distance. You know, it's very quaint, very, very clean. Definitely a lot more yard space and a little bit more well kept than your house, but you know, it's just the difference in money, and maybe the Ash Ketchum home, they prefer a little bit more of a wild look anyways. Over here, you'll notice that we have a flat ride off to the side of Professor Oak's. Now this is awesome because the flat ride does give a view of pretty much everything that we have built so far. It goes relatively high, and you know, the people will have a wonderful view while spinning around and riding this thing. It would definitely be a fun thing to get on and definitely survey the area. Simple on and off queue line. There's not even really a queue booth. In fact, if it was up to me in Alpha 3, I would be getting rid of this ugly yellow kind of ticket booth. It's something that I really can't wait for in the next Alpha update. And of course, we're gonna keep on using the tall grass theme around to kind of fill in areas, even back here behind your rival's house. You know, keep things very rural, very, just natural looking. Now, you guys have probably noticed our giant Pokeball kind of above the main entryway into Professor Oak's. Now this, you can either take this a couple ways. You can either start looking too much like a Poke Center at that point, or you might just be like, oh, that's a cool detail to add to Professor Oak's, considering he deals with Pokemon. Now, Poke Centers, I'm going to make them a little bit different than the game when we get to that building in Viridian City over there. But, I felt like this dead space in the center of the building just needed some detail, and so that's why that is there. Here is our finished kind of circular windows on the upper story, and then we just kind of copied the square windows around the building to fill in some additional space and gave it some gardens out front. And if you guys also play the video game, you have a little wooden fence right below Professor Oak's, and I decided to give that kind of a little bit more of a modern feel with maybe a design logo on the front so people can see that it's a science center of some kind. The chimney also gained a nice little white trim on top just to break it off from the red. And I believe, let's see, I haven't been able to edit the coaster yet either. Really, this building and this building took a lot of my time to kind of clean up and come up with some of the detail work. Though we are pretty much finished with the rock and detail work along this path here. So again, that kind of represents no walking through that area, and a little bit of a cliff section as the main pathing is raised up, just that one extra little block there. I think that's pretty much it for me rambling. Let's go ahead and I will be reworking the back end of Gyarados here, just how it goes into the station in general. I'm glad you guys pretty much liked the coaster overall, though I did add a piece of braking right here just because this is relatively sharp and it does slow it down just a little bit, and I think it allows you to see some of the details a little bit better as you go through. And then I guess my main question for you guys this episode is what to put back here. Now, Pallet Town, of course, just has the two houses and Professor Oak's, but what I would like to do is maybe throw in a restaurant of some kind or some type of gift stall or what have you. And if you guys can go ahead and let me know maybe what would fit what we're working on so far back in this section, that would be wonderful, because I'm pretty much drawing a blank on that one. I've just been copying stuff so much that I'm missing kind of my creative juices to just come up with something fresh. So I think that's going to do us for this episode. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you all enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe for more creative goodness. Go ahead and hit that like button. Leave a comment down below on what you guys think so far, what to change, yada yada. Go ahead and watch my other videos and subscribe if you're new. So I'll see you guys next time in some Planet Coaster. And until then, I'm off to go play some Pokemon Go.